Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. As always, you can email TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and I definitely want to hear from you after this week's episode. A few weeks back, maybe longer than that now, Peter Two, Peter T-O-O, Peter Two, who is fairly well known within the Depeche Mode community, especially if you've spent any time at depeche-mode.com on the home forum. That's where I'm familiar with Peter. I'm certainly more familiar with Peter than he is for me, and I have been for many years, just knowing how big of a fan he is and his contributions to that forum. He reached out to me after we've become acquainted with each other since the start of this Memento Mori era. One of many individuals who I've had the absolute privilege, and it's been a blessing to make so many new friends over the course of this past year and a half or so. Peter's included in that. He reached out to me a few weeks back and asked if I was interested in interviewing SiGNL coming off of their remix of Before We Drown. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I had my home studio a long time ago set up to do interviews, and some technical things had changed since then. So I finally got it back to where I can do interviews again, and I mentioned this on a recent podcast. So it was quiet for a few weeks, and then finally we got the ball rolling. MJ from SiGNL reached out to me, and I could tell from the first email that he sent to me just what a nice guy he was, and how down to earth he was. And this is certainly noticeable in the interview that I just wrapped up with MJ and Ian from SiGNL. We talk a lot about what they do, their creative process. We do get into Depeche Mode, and probably not as much as I had initially hoped, but I don't even want to frame it that way, because you'll hear in the interview. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I did recording it, because while we spent about half the time talking about what they do, we do get into Depeche and the creative process, and a couple of really, really nice guys in the middle of rehearsals for this special show they're doing with Chris Liebling in Cologne, between a few of the Depeche Mode tours there coming up on April 4th. They took time out of their rehearsal practice to spend a little over a half hour talking with me, and I couldn't have been more thrilled with the way that this turned out. So here is the My Nerd World, Depeche Mode, the podcast, interview with MJ and Ian from SiGNL. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure.
No problem.
Thanks for having us.
So you guys are in the middle of rehearsals right now for the upcoming April 4th gig, correct?
Yeah, we're busy. This is Ian's studio, which is kind of like SiGNL HQ for us. So we've been tweaking the set, tweaking the sounds, running it, and it's starting to. We just did one earlier actually, which I was slightly late, and we sort of think we're in a much better shape now.
It was funny. Before I start my radio show in the morning, I'm usually walking around and getting set up, and I've got my headphones in. I'm listening to music, and I was going through your bio and some of your influences. And as I was doing that before you guys popped on, I saw Erasure on here, and I chuckled because Blue Savannah popped up like out of nowhere in my playlist this morning, and I hadn't heard that in been quite a long time. And so we share a lot of similar influences, whether it's Depeche obviously, but Moby, Erasure. It's pretty cool, and I'm digging the single, by the way. Correct me here. Is it, you guys call that KSOR or KSOR? How do you pronounce that?
It'd be KSOR.
KSOR?
It was KSOR originally, but then just by the way it got released, they put it into lowercase for the SOR.
Yes,
so it's KSOR now. Yeah.
If you don't mind getting into it, how do you guys go about in sort of determining like a track name, or even how you came about with SiGNL? I'd be really interested to know how you guys landed on that.
MJ, you tell them about the SiGNL, because I've got no idea. I can't remember.
We used to be called Electronic Periodic, we've sort of been writing. We've been writing together for, fucking hell, sorry, 15 years or something. 20 years even.
Yeah, I think it's more like 20.
Yeah, it was. We just started jamming together, really, without ideas of forming a band or anything like that. And then we did some remixes as electronic periodic for Depeche, Moby, Erasure, Grinder Man, and I guess after the Grinder Man one, that was sort of like more of a sort of like an up tempo sort of sound and thing, and we sort of quite enjoyed doing that. And then as we started doing more stuff together, we started to sort of like build two sides to it. There's sort of like the more ambient things, and then there's sort of like the more stuff that is similar to that evolved into SiGNL. But it didn't really feel right as electronic periodic. Electronic periodic was really, Ian started that as a podcast for just people who liked electronic music and lots of unsigned electronic artists. And
I mean, originally, I think the podcast, I didn't even know what a podcast was then. It was just a way of putting your tracks up and getting people to hear it on the internet. It was that kind of early on in the podcast days. But then it kind of launched. I think it was just fortunate with the name and also the genre of music that when Apple, I think it was when iTunes started putting podcasts and it just launched quite heavily. All of a sudden, it just became very popular. Just again, if you were looking for electronic music, it was an easy search. And then we started getting very like a wide selection of people sending tracks in unsigned, which was really interesting. You know, you start getting a broad selection of music across the world, and had a little platform to release it. But yeah, as MJ said, we started getting a kind of very eclectic bunch of electronic music there. And then I think, we sort of did our own music similar kind of thing. It was very eclectic when it wasn't really in one specific genre. But then now I think with SiGNL, it's channeled a little bit more into a techno vibe.
And I think it actually came from techno because the whole sort of sine wave, square wave, that sort of thing, signal path, electronics and this sort of thing. And then I'm going to admit this to you, John, right? I'm slightly obsessed with fonts, right? And it drives people crazy who work with me because
I was going to ask you about this, actually. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, it's and then when I was writing SiGNL, I tried with umlauts and stuff like this, and that didn't really work. And then just by dropping the I to a lowercase and removing the A, we tried it with a U originally with an umlaut signal, and nothing seemed right. And then it's just sort of like I was playing around with it, and I wrote it in that Eurostyle font, which actually is the extended bold font, Eurostyle extended bold. I thought, oh, that's nice. So I said, Ian, what do you think? I think it was just I'd run him to death with so many ideas. He goes, yeah, fine, mate, whatever. So, and no one was using it. So off we went.
I love the creative process. I mean, whether it's you talking about the fonts, I can absolutely relate to that. Listening to KSOR, KSOR, it was funny because I'm hearing in my head a little bit of Nitzareb. That was partly, by the way, because of just the way that the single looks itself for the single. It actually, the color is pretty close to Showtime, and it kind of popped into my head. But I'm hearing, I'm going back to, early 2000s, and for me, I'm hearing actually a bit of Recoil. I'm hearing Meat Beat Manifesto in there as well. You talk about you talk about how you get so specific on something like your name. In terms of the creative process, I mean, you guys being a team, whenever you're, I've worked as a team format just in radio and entertainment. When it comes to when you're creating, how much of that is driven by, say, the equipment that I'm looking at now behind you, the sounds that it's emitting, how much of this is coming specifically from you when you head into, and we'll talk about your personal project first. I'm really interested in your creative process and how both you, MJ, and Ian can kind of come together to land on a specific idea that you can both agree with. I mean, because that's a special relationship to find somebody when you're looking at, the creation of music. That's a difficult thing when you've got individuals like yourself that need to kind of land on something that you both enjoy.
Well, I think it's an interesting one because, the technology definitely does drive it. I think something that I guess over the years I've been doing electronic music now since the 80s, right, with different bits of hardware, and I've kind of always stayed with hardware. I've gravitated to software from time to time, and initially we did some stuff, didn't we, which was
a lot of Reason stuff, didn't we?
Yeah, but it kind of, I don't know, there's just that sort of haptic kind of control thing. We were just talking about it actually with MJ's daughter Maisie, where she's getting into the equipment because it's hands-on, right? It's something physical to touch and kind of get involved with. And I think that's still the same for me. I've always been very much hands-on. And that gear has kind of evolved into synths, obviously, and modular and the likes. And I know everyone's got their buzzword about modular, but I've always found it a very interesting way of creating sounds. And I think what it is I'll go off on a tangent making sounds, drones, kind of electronic bass sounds and everything else. And then I think where our relationship works is like I could go off on a tangent making all kinds of ambient nonsense, and then MJ will kind of rile it in so that it becomes a bit more of a rhythm-driven track. And I think that's where it works. It's like, the technical side of things, creating sound is probably something I get more involved in, and then the arrangement and the way that the track comes together and the way that the rhythms all work with each other is probably more. You're
also a great interpreter, because if he comes up with a rhythm or a beat or with a drone, I'll go, how about something like this, and then he'll interpret that into, what do you mean this? No, mate, don't be stupid. I mean, and then, when about 3 or 4 goes, it might even sound completely different, but if it's better, I'm just going to shut up and go, yeah, that's exactly what I meant, mate. So we do that again. I spent many years sort of like in clubs and enjoying that sort of this sort of electronic sort of music, which then, as you said, metamorphosized into a lot of the bands that you mentioned earlier. And then, there are still bands like Underworld who are producing stuff, not just Depeche, but like Underworld are more sort of dance based, really, still. And so there's lots of things that we used to listen to, but I think because we were jamming together for so many years, it's not the pressure of, oh shit, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. It very much comes out of something, and we're honest enough with each other to say, actually, that's not really working for this, or we'd be better going off on that tangent, and then off we go. And funny enough, when we've been doing the live set, we've sort of imagined a lot of the tracks that we've done. Ian can explain how we do that, but we've broken it down into like core stems. So actually what we're doing is much raw, and it's almost like to me, it's like a punk electronic thing, because, the sequences run, in theory, they run everything in time, but how we arrange that is completely up to us. So, if all the faders were down, all the buttons are off, you wouldn't hear anything. And if you put everything on, it'll be a complete cacophony of sound. So what we try and do is we try and create sort of like something that goes up and then comes down. And it's not rocket science, but if you're doing it live, it can go really wrong. When you can do it in the studio, you can sort of take something, loop it,
Sure.
It makes it exciting. So I do think it's got sort of like a real punk element to it as well.
Do you build in any opportunity for variation within the live set? You look at a Depeche show, and it's pretty stringent apart from what Martin may do on guitar or what Christian may go and do on the drums. But in terms of what you're producing in a live set, do you have the opportunity for variation to change up those mixes in real time?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different every time, to be honest. I mean, even going back to what MJ was saying about the live stuff, I mean, literally I've gone back into the multi-tracks and pulled sections of it out. And then I think we have 8 tracks on a Electron Octatrack running various different loops or sections from that. It's not even loops sometimes, it's just sections or just triggered samples. Then we have a drum machine, TR-8S, running actual samples from the track as well. So all the drum sounds are back individual, as if they were programmed with the drum machine to start with. And a couple of live synths as well. So, to be fair, from an arrangement point of view, every time we rehearse is slightly different. So I don't think we'll ever do the same thing twice, to be fair. And maybe the order of the tracks might be the same, but that's about it, not the actual arrangements within each track.
What part of the process do you guys enjoy most? I mean, when it comes to the creation aspect of it, making the tracks, hearing the finished track, taking it live, what part of it do you find the most fulfillment and joy out of?
I think for me personally, I mean, the writing side's always been the fun part. But as I've got a background in engineering, I've worked in music industry for a long time as an engineer and a programmer with many different bands. I actually enjoy the mix side as well. That's been something that I've been involved with a lot over the years. Electronic music's been my favourite genre to mix, but where I've worked with many different bands, it's you kind of hone skills in different areas. But yes, for me, it's the writing, I think, and then the mixing. That would be the two elements for me.
Yeah, for me, it's I love the writing because I love the creativity, and like I said, because we don't really have a clash of egos. If something's not working, we just say that's not right. It's not like, oh, I wrote that part, I've got to keep it. And that's how I've always done music with the bands I've worked with. And Ian's definitely sort of like, he does the engineering. He will sort of like get the kick and really, really make the kick sound right for the track, that sort of thing. I have to say, I'm really enjoying the preparation for live. A lot of my life is involved with live music anyway, so it's exciting for me to do that. And it almost came, the live thing was something we wanted to do because I would sort of like DJ at parties and stuff like that. But when you see proper DJs work with not just decks, but with other effects and this sort of thing, you've got to live and breathe. I think to be a really good DJ, you've got to live and breathe that life. You've got to want to be listening to music all the time. You've got to be thinking, how can I build sets and this sort of thing. And I love DJing at parties, but having sync on isn't. I'm just not comfortable with going to a club and pretending I'm a DJ. So when we talked about doing live, we didn't just want to do playback from laptops either, because it wasn't what we were about. We wanted to do something different. And I'm not saying we're breaking boundaries, because there are other acts that do it this way, but it's very few and far between. And there are different reasons for that. When Depeche play, they have a lot of stuff on Pro Tools and that sort of thing,
sure,
which enhances the show and it syncs to the lights. We don't have that problem because we don't have any lights.
We've got one now. We've got one. You brought one today.
I bought a little. Yeah. But then we were talking to Chris. I was talking to Chris Liebing, and Chris is a big Depeche fan as well. And he said, "Oh, you're going to the Cologne shows?" And we were doing the first two of the three shows, and he just played a gig in Cologne. And he said, "Oh, why don't we do a gig?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, just come and do a gig." And Chris had done a remix for us. He goes, "Just fucking get up there. You've been talking about doing this. Just go and do it." And so we thought, there's the challenge. And so Chris put on this evening, which will be on April the 4th, between the first and the second Depeche shows. It's a techno night. It's themed as a techno night, but with Depeche influences. We've reprogrammed our Before We Drown remix, because that was obviously quite mellow, a nice sort of like mid-tempo electronic remix, to make that more clubby. And we can tell people because it's being promoted at club, but we sort of accidentally did a remix of People Are Good, and that was approved. So we will be playing that as well. Again, we've reworked it, and so our set will have a Depeche theme. And the last time I spoke to Chris, he was like, "Oh, do you know what? There are so many fucking amazing Depeche remixes. I want to really put a heavy influence of that in my set as well. So we'll see where it goes, but it's just going to be a good party night. And we thought, why not? And then Ada and Dubfart are playing as well, who are, to us, are fantastic techno artists as well. So we're really excited by it.
I want to get back to Before We Drown in a minute. I was excited to hear about the People Are Good remix. When I first heard that track from Memento Mori, it stuck out to me in a number of different ways. One, it immediately felt like a throwback to, say, Construction Time again. Like almost you could have lifted it out of that era, and I would have been like, yeah, that fits. It's got an interesting portion in it, and this is actually something on this particular record, Memento Mori, that as a fan I picked up on. There's these little nods here and there to stuff they've done previously, and I don't know how much of this was intentional or not. For example, there's a way that the vocal sometimes is sung in Caroline's Monkey that sounds like it's directly from Clean. The squeal in People Are Good feels like it's lifted right from I Feel You. When I heard that, I'm like, this has got to be intentional, and if not, the guys are just grabbing something from before. So I was really excited to hear that you guys were going to be working with that particular track, because for me personally, it's a standout on that album. How did it? You said it was an accident how you remixed it. What happened?
Well, I think what it was, we were just thinking, again, going back to SiGNL with the techno kind of vibe to that genre. Before We Drown didn't quite fit, I think, in that genre for us. It's a bit of a mellow track. It actually fits into more of that earlier tracks or the early music we used to do together, where it was a little bit mid-tempo. So it's not like it wasn't in our comfort zone, but I think when we're promoting tracks online now, to have something that actually relates to the sort of music you're doing, then yeah, I think we wanted to just have a techno remix. And that, People Are Good works really well with that kind of tempo. We've done some more interesting kind of chop-ups of the vocal with it, which originally, you sound about like harkening back to kind of the older tracks. Because it says People Are Good, we were trying to do a People Are People Are People Are People Are kind of a vibe to it. So
sure,
you had a People Are People in there, but it didn't quite sound as clear as that, but it's still quite rhythmic. It's a good little chop-up of the vocal. Couple of other sections where we've lifted just sections of the lines, but then put them in a more of a rhythmic pattern. That seems to work well. You
can't see me. I'm laughing because I actually tried to do what you just mentioned. Because I was listening to People Are People and People Are Good back to back, and in my head I'm going, I've got an editor in here. I'm a radio guy, so I know how to do editing within Adobe and Audition, and I've edited my own music in the past. Nothing compared to what you guys are doing or anything. So I'm like, I wonder if I can pull this off. So I tried to do that. I tried to mix in People Are People into it, and I couldn't. I must have fumbled with it for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and finally I just gave up. So I'm chuckling over here that you guys.
Yeah, but it's fun to do, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Oh no, it's great. It was because you hit it. You guys know better than I do. But if you nail it, it's like awesome. But I couldn't make it work. It's funny.
It was strange. We did Before We Drown because I think it's a very beautiful song.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites on the album, actually.
Yeah.
And both those songs are, I love the album. I think it's the strongest album they've done for absolutely years. It doesn't have a duff track on it. It's just, everything just resonates really well. Even the sequence of it is just amazing. And we were at the O2 shows earlier this year. And when you watch the set, there's some great uplifting sort of like tempo songs that aren't banging techno, but they're sort of like faster, the John the Revelators, the Pain, this sort of thing. And obviously then Enjoy the Silence. And you've got them sort of like, everyone's sort of like, yeah, it makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, the shows are fucking incredible at the moment as well. And it's very sad. Obviously, Andy's not with us, but as a performance between Dave and Martin, the synergy is extremely strong. And I think when we were watching it, I felt I want People Are Good to really just equal that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually, I know Martin, and I sent him a message, and we messaged each other predominantly through Arsenal football games. And I said, look, I've got this idea for People Are Good. Do you mind if we have a go? And he said, no, just have a go. And he goes, but just send it to me, right? So I thought, all right. So we did the mix, and we sent it over to him. And I sent him a message and said, look, I'll send it to you if Arsenal win tonight. And Arsenal did win. So we sent him the mix, and didn't hear anything for 3 days. I thought, oh shit. He hates it. Right. We've blown it now. And then I just got an email back 3 days later going, oh, mate, really, really like this. It's fantastic. Send it to Dave. And Dave, who is an absolute gentleman, gave it the best sort of like approval process possible. He sent a skull and a thumbs up emoji. So there we were. We were approved. And so we didn't do it intentionally. We did it because it was generally something that we both had talked about, and then we sort of were inspired by the live show to actually do it. So it was something very much from the roots, rather than something that was sat down thinking, right, let's go and do a remix.
Yeah, and it definitely flowed. It went really, really quite well, the actual process, right?
Yeah, it did. It was really quick.
It just came together in about 4 hours. It was quite quick.
Oh, wow.
And then that's always a good sign, right? I mean, that for me kind of means it's just going to work, right? You just get all the things right at the first time, and it just sort of gels together. I think that's, again, how, going back to how we write stuff, that's kind of how things come together for us anyway when we put music together. So again, it just fits in how we work, what we do, and how it sounds at the end. So it's kind of it just fits nicely in our genre, and also for the live set as well, fits in quite good.
I've been listening to the band. I first found them in 86, hearing Shake the Disease, and like so many fans like myself, they just become a part of your life. It's the fabric of your life. And I don't know how aware you guys are. I know MJ, you go back like some 25 years. I don't know how connected how long you've been connected, Ian, to the band to the band as well. But are you guys sort of aware in terms of a fandom perspective, like anybody that has their official hand on anything Depeche Mode, like it's almost like you're immediately in the club? It's like it's like, oh my gosh, like Depeche has chosen them to remix one of their songs. They must be special. This kind of thing. Are you aware of sort of that level of devotion that we fans have?
Yeah, 100%. I worked at Mute Records, so when sort of Europe opened up, whether it was the Iron Curtain coming down or stuff like this, we would sometimes have people make a pilgrimage to 429 Harrow Road just to come to the record company, and and the guy who ran Mute Bank, which is what became like the online web shop, would often just try and collect things that and just have a box when people turned up, whatever it was, just give them something Mute related, because I mean Depeche fans are incredible. If you've ever tried to get to the band hotel, it's it's like coming out of a gig sometimes, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
But I have to say, what I really, really like about Depeche fans is that when you go to the concert, it's this lovely, free, sort of feel-good feeling. We both, Ian and I, went out with our wives to New York to see the show out at Madison Square Gardens on this tour, and we were just chatting away, and there was a guy next to me, and his wife had been into the band. He'd never ever seen the band, but his wife was so into it, he'd flown from Colorado because there was a reason they couldn't go to the Colorado show, so they decided to go up to New York and watch it, and he sort of like, he was blown away. And at the end of it, he had tears in his eyes because he was just like, I cannot believe, you and I, we know what's coming,
right?
The build-up of the show, the fan interaction, Dave's interaction, Martin's interaction, and now Christian and Peter. And, so it's incredible when you think about how connected they are to their fans and how much they mean to their fans. And there's, you know, I've recorded hundreds and hundreds of shows around the world from many, many different bands. And I still think to this day that Depeche have a connection to their fan base that is quite incredible. You know, very few bands have that.
I want to say from doing this podcast and, you know, hearing from so many individuals just from doing this, because this is like the only weekly Depeche Mode podcast that's out there. And so you pass that on to their guys, by the way, because I still want to talk to either of them. So you let them know. But I want to say thank you on behalf of those that listen to the podcast for what you from what you both did for Before We Drown, because I know that from a fan's perspective, we love these remixes and the dance remixes, but Before We Drown and your mix of it really struck a chord because of what you guys created in keeping such an essence of the song intact and then creating something different on top of it. And I echo that. I echo that sentiment. I know that when it was released, and we talk about the singles every time they come out here on the pod, that your mix of Before We Drown is the one that sort of garnered the most praise and the feedback from those listening. The question I have, I know that I watched the YouTube clip where you guys had layered over some of the commentary around how you recorded the track, and I don't want to repeat what's in there. I do want to ask, though, a bit about, one, approaching Depeche or somebody else's work, how you go about doing that. How much of it is keeping in mind what they were trying to accomplish versus what you want to do? And then also specifically with Before We Drown, that inclusion of that portion of the split mix, was that a direct sample, or did you guys recreate that in studio?
It's a recreation. I mean, to be fair, when we first heard the track, and again, you know, we sat here actually and just listened to some of the early kind of versions of tracks before it was released, and that Before We Drown, it's kind of there's three bits of it that struck to me. First of all, that kind of euphoric build you get with the vocal and also the kind of string section. That's the bit we wanted to kind of replicate, because it only seems to happen once on, you know, in the original version, which is great. I mean, it works well, but we wanted to kind of replicate that and have that build happen a couple of times. And when we first started kind of copying it over, one of my favorite 12-inch or remixes of Depeche Mode tracks is that split mix of Never Let Me Down. I mean, it's just got 2 or 3 sections in it. You just want to listen to it over and over. It's just a very, very well put together extended version. So the 16th kind of bass line that comes in, I don't know if you remember the Anton Corbijn video where there's like the shoes start walking. I don't know if you remember that when it came out, but there was that bit where it drops down. It's got that bit. So I didn't want to lift it or sample it, so we recreated something similar, and then we added MJ's bass alongside it, which kind of lifts it as well, gives it a kind of a dirty sound to it. So it wasn't necessarily to copy the split mix, it's just in some way
like an homage.
Yeah, it's in some way just get that feeling, the feeling that it has where it drops, bangs back in with something, and it's that feeling that we tried to get, and you know, it's really it's quite humbling to think that people liked it, so that's good, you know. I mean,
yeah, it really was, and the feedback was lovely from the fans, and I think that's why we, you know, obviously Martin and Dave approved it, but then to actually have acceptance from the Depeche fans was really great for us. And because, like I said, Ian actually, he phoned me up and he said, look, the split mix, you know, he was like, he felt it was really important to him because it meant something so much to him, and he was saying, but I don't know, and I said, look, it's we've done it, it's what it is. I think, you know, I think we should say something. And even before we did the video, people out there, fans out there, had said there's a direct reference to this in a really nice way. Not that we'd plagiarized it, but we'd sort of like just tip caps to it. And
it did give you that sense. So you've got the build-ups, you've got the drops, you've got the builds, the drops, and then at the end, rather than it just dropping again, it actually goes into something a little bit more driven, which, you know, again is that little nod to the split mix.
Well, it's funny because from a fan's perspective, if you're not familiar with what you guys do or your background with the band already, I can tell you, because I saw this happen just with feedback that I got. You know, a fan immediately identifies that portion of the split mix in the song, and it's almost like a stamp of credibility. It's like, oh, these guys, they know what they're doing. they pulled this from the split mix, and so it was like you said, it was an homage, and it absolutely works. Listen, I know we're almost out of time. I've kept you guys for a while, and actually a timer clicking down on my Zoom meeting. So, Ian, we'll have to save a Star Wars conversation for another time. I believe you're a massive fan. I was going to grill you a little bit, but I do want to ask one question. And MJ, you brought this up earlier. You've working with the band for as long as you have, and myself and the fans agree. So the quality of Memento Mori. Is there anything in your mind that you think that you can point to as to why this album seemed to come out the way that it did? Because I agree with you. I mean, I'll take this and put it up next to Songs of Faith and Devotion as some of the best work they've done. Is there anything just with your history with the band that you can say, I think this is the reason why this album ended up, being as good as it is in your mind?
I think, I think Martin is an incredible songwriter. He worked with Richard Butler on a number of songs as well for Psychedelic Furs. And I think maybe when he was working with Richard, that sort of, I don't know if that gave Martin something. I don't know, but I think there's the collaboration where they've worked together is really interesting. I think Dave's quality as a songwriter is improving, and it's when I listened to that album, I didn't go, that's a Dave song, that's a Martin song. I listened to that album. I sat down in a sushi restaurant with Daniel Miller, listening to it from his laptop on headphones, because I was allowed to listen to the album. I wasn't allowed to even have a watermark stream of it. So, and I listened to that and I thought, Christ, this is just amazing in the way that it just blew me away. But then as I got to know the album, eventually listened to it over and over again, it just pulled me in. Different songs mean so much in different ways. Ghosts Again is a great pop song. Yet Wagging Tongue is quite sort of like dark. And, and I think it was very bold of them to make Wagging Tongue single 2 as well. It's great because, you could say, well, People Are Good is a more of a traditional sort of pop song, if you like, or a radio song. But everything on there was really good. I don't know whether the fans connected more because we lost Andy and we felt that maybe there's a finite element to what Depeche Mode doing, when maybe we're taking that for granted. I don't know. I'm not involved with the writing and the recording of the album. I listen to it like you do, John, and when I hear it, it's like, oh my God, that is incredibly good. It's a beautiful, and I think sequencing an album just isn't done this day. Everyone just puts out, including yourself, single, couple of remixes with it. But I think what they did was they really thought about it, and it just sounds great.
Well, you guys have got a fan over here. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me. And can we expect a full SiGNL release sometime in the future?
You get another one tomorrow.
Yeah, there is.
I'm looking forward to hearing that. I really am.
So that's actually got Daniel's remix on it, Mathematic. So that Daniel's done a remix for us. Daniel Miller, that is.
Yeah.
So he's we all go a long way back with Daniel, and he's I've worked with him for many years.
Ian looks after all his. That's how we actually met. Actually, I was managing the studio at Mute, and Ian was working for Avid Digidesign, but also he's really heavily into modular synths. You can't see his modular synths from the shop, but
it's over there somewhere.
It's over there, and Daniel needed someone who was on his level to help look after his modular synths. So
that's been about 30 years.
Yeah, I found Ian, realised he knew what he was talking about, and wouldn't let him go.
But it's good. So Daniel's, he's given me a lot of help over the years. He's very he's amazing with all the synths and sounds and everything else. I've picked up stuff. He's helped me out. We've done libraries and bits and bobs together for sample companies and stuff. And Yeah, and I think it's interesting actually when Daniel did the remix of this Mathematic, the track that's coming out. You know, he said one thing to me. He goes, "Don't just leave a snare drum in because it's there. If he doesn't need it, just take it out." And his mix, you know, he's done his magic on it. But it's just quite interesting how, you know, he's got a great ear for tracks, especially with this kind of genre as well, with electronic. So I think, you know, it's quite privileged to have a mix by him, really.
Yeah,
we can learn by it, right? And I think that's what everyone does. I mean, the band, you know, Depeche have definitely been influenced by Daniel over the years. So to have one of our tracks mixed by him is just an extension of that experience. Really. Yeah, it's good.
Well, MJ, Ian, guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a fantastic gig. And I just, again, I really appreciate the time. I could pick your brain for another hour, but I'll let you get back to work. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of a SiGNL in the future. And again, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Lovely, John. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thanks, John.
Again, that was MJ and Ian from SiGNL, and I really hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Hearing the creative process and these two individuals giving up, you know, a half hour, 40 minutes of their time in the middle of their rehearsing, you know, it means a lot to me. I know what it's like when you're in the middle of a project and you're having to have, you know, be pulled away, but the guys couldn't have been any nicer, and I don't think it's any surprise whatsoever that Depeche Mode works with them, just based off the time that I got to spend and their creative process, how much they love what they do. And while I had anticipated and planned on talking more about Depeche Mode, I really enjoyed just hearing them talk about what they do. And, you know, it's applicable to what Depeche Mode does. And I really enjoyed that. I think you can probably tell during the interview and even in my voice now how much fun that was. So I want to hear from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. As always, drop me an email. And I look forward to getting your feedback from my conversation with them. And I kind of snuck in there. Put in a good word for me, guys. Let's get Martin or Dave or both of them on the show, right? All right, that wraps up the show for this week. No listener feedback. We'll get to that next week. But I do want to hear from you. So, again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Listen, if this is one of your first times listening to... Well, let me put it this way. If this isn't your first time listening to the show and you've heard me talk about my books before, thank you so much for listening. And I'll say goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week. If you are a new listener to the show, don't go anywhere yet. If you want to support my nerd world and Depeche Mode, the podcast, and you like to read science fiction, I hope you'll take a moment and check out my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with a story set in the future where air and space flight culture has replaced car culture. Follow a ragtag squadron of pilots and one reluctant hero on a journey of survival as they fight for their future among the stars. It is inspired in part by Depeche Mode, life in the so-called space age, the world that we live in, and life in general. Depeche Mode plays a part in the underlying themes of the story. A lot of romance involved. The main character himself is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time in the future when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. They feature references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. The description for Book 1 is as follows. With interstellar travel possible, pilot Tafgardia prepared to travel to distant worlds. But when an apocalyptic industrial accident sparks a global evacuation, exploring the stars becomes a matter of survival. Meanwhile, a ruthless corporate madman with an armada of starships threatens every vessel not loyal to his regime. When a cryptic message from the past leads to what may be the only key to stopping him, it's up to Taft and his squadron to save Earth's evacuees before it's too late. So if you like science fiction, filled with some romance, a lot of cool technology and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. It's written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus in terms of content. 7 books in all in the series. 2 trilogies with a connecting story in Book 4. You can pick up Book 1 today and pick up all the books in the series. An ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook produced and narrated by me. Available at mynerdworld.net or just head on over to amazon.com and search for EMBARK, Jon Justice. If you are interested in purchasing any of the books directly from me in hardcover or paperback, you can do that as well. Same email, and I'll give you details. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you